All right, we're on. Well, welcome back to Rich Lessons with Sevetri and Sheena. Super excited to have you back. I'm not sure if you all have had a chance to listen to the last episode, but I'm just going to let y'all know it was a hit. It was probably one of the most engagement posts that we've received in a while across our podcast episodes. And we definitely want to continue to hear from you, hear feedback, but we definitely received a lot of positive feedback on that episode. So if you haven't listened, make sure you go tune in. This episode is focused on networking. In fact, we're calling power networking how to get in the right room and stay there. And I know between Sheena and I, we have been in a lot of different rooms with all types of people for all types of reasons. And I often hear from people, okay, I'm in the room, but how do I meet the right people? I'm going to show up, but how do I ensure that I'm networking right? If there is a thing as networking right. So we're going to talk about all of that. But before we get started, I want to go off topic a little bit because before we started this episode, Sheena let me know that she has never had king cake. And my mind is blown that she lives so close to New Orleans and is from Mississippi and has never had king cake. And so, Sheena, how can we help you? How can I help you help yourself?
First off, I also found out Sevetri sends out king cake, and I've never gotten one. And I've known her for a year, so technically, I can kind of blame you. Half of the blame. You've never sent me one.
I will accept the blame. For years, I haven't done it in probably like 2 years. I will send out king cakes. I would send them out to my team members. I send them out to my investors. I would send them out to my friends. Not all my friends, but a couple of friends, particularly those who have kids or, maybe we had collaborated on something. And let me tell you, it's always a hit. It's a fan favorite every time. So I do need to get started back doing that. It's not cheap to ship king cakes either, but it's worth it. And so I do want to get back to doing that. I felt like that was like my staple thing that people would look for. Shout out to my friend Harold. He's probably the only person that's going to get one this year because he has kids. And I think they look forward to it.
What was this? Was it like last week when we were talking about king cake? I think you sent me something on Instagram. It was about the baby in the king cake. And I was like, there's a baby in the king cake? And you was like, there's no way you don't know this.
Yes. So if you're not familiar with king cakes and a tradition of Mardi Gras and getting a king cake, the king cake comes with a baby somewhere in the king cake. Now, this baby is not edible, so please do not swallow the baby and be on the lookout for it. Don't crack a tooth or a crown or whatever it is. But there's a baby in the cake, and the rule goes is if you get the baby, then you have to buy the next king cake. Now, Sheena said that she was coming to New Orleans to get a king cake, but I told her she can't just get any king cake. It's very important that her first king cake be a hit. So I'm not sure if you have any specific places on your agenda, but let me know.
I'm calling you. I'm just going to call you. This is like part of networking. You get with the right people. They know the right places and the right people. So you're in my network. So I'm going to call you and say, where do I go in New Orleans to get the best king cake? And I'm going to look forward to it. I'm ready.
Yeah. And I'm going to let you know, you got to get up early because the king cakes sell out. It is very serious. You have to understand. It's very serious business, these king cakes. And people get up.
That's true. So when I was in New Orleans, maybe a month ago, I actually did. A friend actually was going to take me to get king cake, and we pulled up. It's a big sign on the door that says sold out. And I was like, no. So I did try about a month ago. And they were sold out. But it was also like 5:00 in the evening. So you're right.
Oh yeah, it wasn't no more king cake for 5:00. You know what? Just let me know. I might pick up one for you depending on what time you get here so that you actually have it. Nonetheless, let's get back on topic. Thank you all for entertaining me, letting me entertain you a little while with this king cake because it is Mardi Gras season, carnival season here in New Orleans, and king cakes are a big deal. But let's get back on track. So networking, Sheena, if I had to ask you, what is like your top tip for networking and getting in the right room? Where do you even start?
Closed mouths don't get fed.
Hey, I
As
hear
the
that.
right, and the reason I say that is because I am actually introverted.
Me
Well,
too.
I guess I'm an ambivert, I guess. So I'm a little bit of both, but I'm way more introverted than I am extroverted. And part of networking is sometimes it is like literally just walking up to somebody and saying, "Hey, my name is," or introducing yourself, or because I've definitely been in rooms and I know like I need to go talk to that person or I need to go introduce myself. But it takes I have like muster of the now I'm thinking muster, sorry, off topic, but now I'm thinking like muster from Super Bowl. Anyway,
Deep.
um, but that's like it takes a lot because I'm introverted. But the power of networking, a lot of times, it is truly closed mouths don't get fed. You have to walk up to people, network with people. Go. Sometimes it's uncomfortable or it's odd or random. And maybe it's like, but I've seen it work. Walk up to people in a room. But for me, the number one lesson for me, or the number one thing for me, shall I say, to your question, is simply closed mouths don't get fed. But again, for me, that's tough because I am introverted.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I am also introverted, and a lot of people will say the same, or maybe, they're outgoing, whatever it is. But I think you do have this number of entrepreneurs and founders who are introverted, but are trying to figure out how do they network. I think the first thing is realizing that it's naturally going to be some anxiety around going into a room where you don't know anyone or a few people in that room, right? And so I think that there's like this natural feeling in your stomach in your gut when you walk into a room and you're like, okay, I need to like shake it off and go in here and do what I came here for. But I always tell people kind of look at the full range of opportunity in a room. Sometimes that opportunity is for you to meet someone that can help you. Sometimes that opportunity is for you to meet one that can help someone or
Yeah.
maybe the opportunity is for you to meet someone that you can help, right? And so I think that if you go into a room with an open mind, whether you're like, oh, I didn't walk away with any contacts, which if you didn't walk away with any contacts, something's not right. You weren't in the right room. And so, speaking of the right rooms, where do you focus your time today? If you were right now, you're working on different projects. Are you going to conferences? Are you going to small events? Are you going to dinners? Like, what are you looking for when it comes to networking?
So I definitely do conferences that are towards or working towards something that so if it's AI, I'm going to go to an AI conference. Back when I was doing CapWay, I didn't mind going to Money 2020. I mean, Money 2020 was like a big party to some degree, but everybody there was into fintech. They were into finance. So I didn't mind going to Money 2020 because I could network with people. In fact, a lot of the conferences, people don't go to the conference to actually sit into these sessions. They go just to network. South
Yeah,
by Southwest is coming up. Most people never buy a pass to South by Southwest. They just
I'm
go to in the city to network. So for me, I actually love conferences if you go for the right reason. I'm not going even without buying a pass. I'm not going anywhere just to hang out. If I go, I'm going with a purpose. I'm going with an agenda. I'm going with goals. But I actually am a fan of conferences if you actually are going for the right reasons with a true goal in mind.
Absolutely. One thing that often I think about when it comes to networking is people say, oh, leverage your own network, right? Leverage your existing network to get into rooms. But oftentimes people are like, well, I don't even have that existing network. So where do you start? If you had to think about leveraging your existing network versus not having a network around a new space, where do you strike the balance, you think?
I mean, I think, and maybe it's not so much now, but I know when I first got started and I didn't have the network that I have now, I actually did use things like Meetup. I would look on Instagram for like what's going on. Facebook was definitely much bigger when I was starting. So what was going on around apps? I used to tell people all the time take trips to just tech cities because, of course, for me, it's I did technology. So, what's it like to go to Silicon Valley for a week or two? There's always going to be like tech weeks. So you have New York Tech Week, you have San Francisco Tech Week. So even if you don't have the network, there's usually events going on
Mhm.
someplace somewhere that you can go and insert yourself. So you don't have to, it doesn't have to be Sevetri sending me an invite only, an exclusive event or a warm intro. I can just go to New York Tech Week and it's a whole list of events for the week that is open to anyone who wants to come. So therefore I don't have a network per se, but I'm inserting myself into a place where the only thing I can do is network with the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think about when people talk about like networking, this idea of networking, and I remember it was like Issa Rae, and she said that people would tell her, you need to reach out to Oprah and let Oprah help you get into these doors. And she said, well, no, like I'm going to use the people around me, like my network, people I've been building with through, thick and thin, my friend, my roommates, etc. Like we're going to just get it together and we're going to like break through these doors together. And so I agree with that to a certain extent. So I consider that like networking across, right? So these are your colleagues, these are your peers, these are people that you have collaborated with, and you both have something that is very tangible to give each other. But then I also believe in the power of networking up, right? And so this is accessing another level of network where it may open up opportunities for business, et cetera, in a different way and faster, right? Because that individual can vouch for you, and then thus they can open doors for you. But I'm curious to know, how do you think about networking when it comes to, are you more of a network with peers? Or are you more a, let me try to reach the CEO of, American Express?
You know what? I'm shooting for the stars. I'm not even gonna lie to you. But I do believe that if you are surrounded by the right people, networking across, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I'm very, very, very conscious of it because everybody, Michelle Obama says that everybody can't come along. Like sometimes you gotta leave people. Tyler Perry even says it. Like I had to learn that sometimes you gotta leave people behind. But now there's someone I can network across. We have the same goal, the same ambition. We're okay with being up at 2 a.m. to make this work. I am actually okay with that because we're getting it together. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I'm definitely also gonna send that email, ask for that warm intro. How do I get to somebody above? And what's so crazy is one of the greatest lessons I've learned in networking, particularly when I'm in certain rooms, is to actually network with the person who doesn't have the social media, who doesn't have the large following, who is probably the quietest one in the room. That's probably by far been my biggest lesson on sometimes the most helpful person in the room. It's not the
Yeah.
person that is front facing.
Absolutely. And also, when you're in a room, I think that to that point, sometimes you have two or three people in the room and everybody's trying to get in
Same
front of them.
person.
But most likely than not, there are other very important people and like people who just could be beneficial to your journey in that room that no one even knows about, right? And so I definitely agree with you there. And for those who are more introverted, just talking to people allows you to like settle those nerves. It allows you to get into like a groove. It allows essentially for you to like calm yourself so that you get that vote of confidence when your conversation really gets going and you're like, okay, I have something to add to this conversation. I have, someone who's engaging me back. And now we brought other people into the conversation and now I bridged other parts of the room. And so for those who are like the fly on the wall and you just naturally you're in the room, right? Because the first thing is just show up.
Yeah.
But if you just show up and just go stand in the corner and you never talk to anyone, then you're probably wasting your time. So I always tell people like push yourself to engage, and then your natural the natural anxiety that you have around networking will just naturally decrease. So I think about that when I think
I mean,
about how I
but
have done it myself.
you talk about even being in the room, which is important. Um, but I think this is interesting, particularly coming from you because you're in New Orleans, but you have spent a
Mhm.
lot of time in New York. So do you feel like when it comes to power networking, the location matters?
So I do think location matters depending on what is your objective. and what you're trying to do. But there's networking opportunities in every city, right? I actually have to go to an event tonight that literally is something that I personally would probably skip and not want to go to. But I could see ahead 6 months from now, a year from now, how me going to this meeting or going to this event where I am networking with people to show my interest in something is going to help me a year from now, right? And so I do feel, regardless of where you are, that you need to get out there and network. And I do consider myself a pretty decent networker. And I also am very in tune to like, oh, how do you like work a room? And then sometimes, I'll go to something and I have no intention to work a room at all, right? I'm just kind of going for something specific to hear somebody speak, to meet one person or two people. I'm very, very focused in on how I use my time when I'm going to specifically network.
So I'm gonna throw the same question you had for me back to you though. How do you feel about either networking across or networking up? So same, you trying to get in touch with like, the CEO of Apple, you trying to call Tim Cook, or you're like, no, there's people across that I'm gonna go call them first.
Yeah, I think that both. So obviously, we created this podcast. We look to people around us to help us with people in our network to help us actually launch this and bring it to fruition. And there are other opportunities, right? So we want to bring on more guests. We want to like bridge out and pull from our existing network of individuals who have gone on to accomplish many great things, right? So I do think that there is a balance of what you need and what can get you to where you're trying to go. Now, for me, networking up has been something that has been harder, but I have approached it with just kind of like this tenacity around like, okay, if I get in front of this person, I'm gonna kill it, right? Like there's nothing that they're not going to want to help me with. There's not anything that they're going to say, oh, well, no, or brush me off. And I do think that it is the case for most people. So if you meet someone or you get in front of someone and you're trying to get on their schedule, right? Most people, you might have to work around their schedule. You might have to like really figure out the right time. But most people are willing to work and meet with someone at least once
Yep.
if you get in front of them or if you're connected to them via someone in your network. And so I do believe in the power of networking up. In fact, when I heard Issa Rae say, oh, we network here, I'm like, girl, we also got to network up too, because all of it is relevant.
Yeah, and we've actually talked about this a little on a previous episode, but you'll be amazed at who you think is so far ahead of you or above you, but they will actually truly give you the time of day. Even if it's like, I only got 15 minutes for you, but you'll be amazed at who will give you 15 minutes. It can be it can be Tim Cook. I
Yeah.
think that's one thing I had to learn was don't be afraid to just ask. The worst you can do is get a no. Get ignored or get a no. It's like the worst is going to happen. But you also can get them to be like, okay, I can give you 2 minutes. I can give you 10 minutes. And one thing I also will say is if or when you're able to email this person or get on the phone with them, if you say, give me 10 minutes, stick to 10 minutes. And I promise you, they'll actually take another call.
Yes, you definitely don't want to ever be like a burden on someone, right? You want to be able to be very clear and engaged about what you can bring to the table and what you're looking for too. And so we always think about people that reach out to me, and people reach out to me, people reach out to you. They want to network, they want to get coffee, they want to like take you to lunch, all these things. And most times I do engage with people and, am like, okay, yeah, let's grab coffee or let's jump on a Zoom call to connect. And sometimes those individuals want to be introduced to people, right, in my network. And I'm always like, you have to build not just network, but you have to build relationships with people because often people don't want to just like introduce you to someone. They just met you 10 minutes ago. And now you're like, oh, can you introduce me to all these people in your network without actually getting to know those individuals? And so I also believe like networking is something that you have to stay consistent with, and you have to turn your network into relationships. And that's really how you unlock the power of networking, when those individuals would then turn back and say, hey, I have this opportunity for you, or let me introduce you to someone, or who do you need to be introduced to? How can I help you? Right. And genuinely mean it and are willing to open up their Rolodex.
Yeah, I actually had someone who was definitely well ahead of in their career than where I am in mine. And I remember this person actually told me the reason I respond or the reason I'm willing to help is because every time you reach out to me, you're not asking me for something.
Mm-hmm.
That stuck with me. And so now if I meet someone, sometimes it is just a genuine, how are you doing? Just call to check on you. I actually found a friend yesterday. He had a little girl and he sent me a picture. One of his investors from a previous company actually sent him some clothing for his little girl. And he was like, this makes a heck of a difference versus like you just being an investor or just let me reach out because I want something. I want to ask something. I need money. I want you to invest, or even with it being reversed. So I agree. I think not just asking for something and not asking for it all the first or second time makes a heck of a difference when you're building your network.
Right. And the other thing is, people have the right to say no, right? And they have the right to not engage you. I think that people get so offended when people say no or they don't respond, etc. But I think that just comes along with like the territory. People do it to me all the time. But I do feel that the way you respond to people, because you never know when you're going to come back and see that person down the road, where they may be in a better position to help you or to respond to you. And so I think that's also something to note. Now, something that you mentioned, and the person that you mentioned was Tim Cook. Now, I find that funny because I shared this on Threads, is that Tim Cook and Odell Beckham were in New Orleans for the Super Bowl, and they were just like walking around. They were having lunch at like hole in the walls, po' boy joints. They were just hanging out. When I tell you, there really wasn't much security around. And when I tell you, people were brushing by Tim Cook to try to get to Odell Beckham, like they're about to knock the man over with their excitement that Odell Beckham was in this room. They didn't even know who Tim Cook was, right? And in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, if I was in the room, I'd be talking to Tim Cook. But it goes back to what I said about you have no idea sometimes the people who are in the room, right? Yeah. You looking for the shiny person.
Yeah, that I saw some of the photos of that. I mean, to be fair, Odell Beckham is Odell Beckham Jr. But from a business perspective,
we're on different missions, ladies and gentlemen. Sheena is a lady. I am a married woman, so we on different missions. Okay.
I mean, at the end, it's about business. So in the end, I'm trying to get to Tim Cook. I just wanted to say, just for fairness, for fairness. Yeah, we're going to skip over that for Austin gets on to me. But again, I said it a little while ago in this podcast. Don't always go for the person that has the most followers. I promise you, there's somebody behind that machine that you want to talk to that you probably have no clue who they are. And that's actually why I asked you about, even does like a city make a difference? And I agree, you can network anywhere. I don't care if you're in the middle of the Delta of Mississippi or if you are in San Francisco or LA. You can network anywhere. But I can honestly say, when I have been in bigger cities, again, not taken away from the smaller cities or anything, but when I have been in bigger cities, it's just simply going out to eat. And the person at the bar, the person that's sitting beside you, going to Starbucks and just coding or working on something, and somebody walks by and it's like, oh, what are you working on? Hey, I work for X. I would love to bring you in. So I have found also sometimes networking just happens, does happen based off location. But again, I don't want to make it sound like you have to be in a major city for that to happen.
Yeah, and maybe you're not in a major city, but you have to spend time there, whether it is virtually, right, via connecting with people in those cities, or if it's physically. I do feel, to your point, I stay connected to New York. I'm often in New York and in other cities. And I do feel like I have that spark of energy because it's just so many new people to me. It's so much that I'm absorbing as it relates to information. There's dinners to be had, there's lunches to be had. And so I do feel that, once you have built your network up, and it's strong, then you could retreat down to a little small city in Alabama if you want to, and still kind of have the power of your network. And it kind of goes back to what's her name, Emma. She is one of the co-founders of Good American and
Oh,
Skims, and
yeah,
all
yeah.
the Kardashian brands. I forget her last name, but she was on New York Times, and she was talking specifically about people going back into the office, right? And she was like, yeah, if you think you're going to get ahead by continuously working from home, then I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. Now, this is a very controversial topic. you know Going back into the office versus working from home, people are literally out here taking a hard stance on they do not want to go back, right? People have sent letters to JP Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon. We don't want to go back. We don't need to go back. And my stance on it is, if you are coming out of college or you are entering the job market for the first time, you probably need to be in somebody's office.
Yeah.
Call me, call it controversial. I don't care, because what you're able to do by networking with people in an office and going to lunch and connecting with your boss and all these different things, you just cannot do on a Zoom. People are on Zoom to do what they need to do for that 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and they trying to get on their next Zoom, right? They're not trying to have a powwow with you randomly. You can't walk up someone's desk. Yes, is there some nuances with wasted time and people aren't able to finish their work? Yeah, there are some nuances with that. But if you want to get ahead, just based on that,
Yeah.
it really does matter who's in your network. And how do you
Yeah.
meet people at home 24/7? I'm at
I
home now working. I'm like, I need to get out. I push myself to get out of the house to work.
Yeah, 100%. Even I always tell people, even if it's hybrid, like you're not going to be able to do the same brainstorming and have very creative thoughts, in my opinion, if you're sitting on a Zoom. But it's networking is there's different levels to it. I'll speak to it because you currently have your LSU, jacket
Yeah.
on. People go to certain colleges strictly for the network.
Mm-hmm.
People, most people are not like, I'm going to Harvard because I want a great education. Most people are like, I'm sending my child to Harvard, or I'm going to Harvard for the network. I want to get into YC because of the network. So network, however and wherever it looks like, matters for sure.
Absolutely. And it goes back to like your circles, right? And I think like one of the key things to networking is sometimes you have to create your own power circles and feed off of those things. I've been invited to like 2 book clubs in the last month, and I'm actually going to join both of them because I like to read and I want a circle of people to talk about things with that I'm reading. And so I'm going to join both of those, book clubs. Now, is that a great networking opportunity? Yes. It's also a great space for people to increase their communication skills, right, with other people without it being a lot of pressure, right? So I do think that there are a lot of opportunities to create your own circles and then utilize those circles to network with others. And there are many examples of that, right? When you think about like those old school platforms like Meetup, that was someone that was like, man, I'm in New York and I can't connect. Back in the day, it was like 15 years ago, I can't connect with the people that are doing what I'm doing and people in this age range or whatever it is. So I'm going to create Meetup and see if people meet up. And they did. And so
Yeah.
that led to many opportunities for that founder. And then he went on to raise like millions of dollars for Meetup. And, the rest is history. And so sometimes you do have to create your own power circles.
I mean, actually, when you were saying that, what I was thinking was a little bit different, but it kind of went back to talking about networking across, but also building your own power circle sometimes. I always think of LeBron James. I don't know why, but every time I think of like building your own power circle with literally networking across, mind you, to be fair, he was LeBron James. So, I mean, since high school, he probably could have made a phone call and got a lot because he was LeBron James. But I do still admire the networking he did across to bring some of his friends along with him and how they put in the work to make sure they were able to um, work on his level because it was LeBron James. So I always think about networking across power moves as LeBron. But again, it is LeBron James.
LeBron. Yeah, but to the other side of that, right? It's LeBron. However, LeBron's team and the people around him, they went and got training. They worked at some of the best places. They went and did what they needed to do to position themselves to continue to build his dynasty, right? To build this dynasty, which ultimately now has allowed them to build their own legacy. And so I think that when you look around your circle, and I think for most people, you have people in your circle is like you can see people's trajectory sometimes at like a younger age, and you're like, oh, this person's going to do this, or this person's going to do that. And if you have the ability to position yourself to help someone in your network or your circle, and you have the skill set, right, to enhance what they have going on, then you could build the same scenario that LeBron built with his friends without the person having to be like almost a billionaire from playing basketball, right? That has happened in many different spaces, in many different circles where people have done similar things.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really important, another lesson that I've learned from networking or being around, certain people, was that there's no such thing as, you shouldn't look at certain situations as networking down or being a pause. And I'll give an example of that. I remember in 2014, I was, fresh out of college in the Bay and Lean Startup. It was the Lean Startup Conference. I'll never forget it. And I met Wayne Sutton. So for anybody who's been like in tech a long time, like the OGs for us, it's like the Wayne Suttons, the Kimberly Bryants, the And I remember meeting Wayne. I said, "Oh my gosh, it's Wayne Sutton." And I went and sat down. So you're talking about networking. I went and sat down at his table, which felt so random because I am introverted. But I remember he told me, he said, well, you have a choice if you really want to do well in tech, specifically as a Black woman or as minority in general. He said, either you got to put yourself out there and almost like become a star. He said, or, and what I would recommend, go and work at a tech company and network, learn how the business is ran. You might find your co-founder there. You never know what's going to happen just by going to work at Google for 6 months, going to work at Facebook for a year. Like you never know the possibilities, but that goes back to networking.
Yeah.
And you and I both know a lot of the big companies that we now have seen over the last 10 years came from co-workers at a previous company who
Yes.
left and became co-founders and now have built some of the biggest unicorns that we know of to today. But that
Yeah.
is networking.
It all leads back to networking, and people will take individuals out of their network and essentially crown them, right? Give them the keys to the next big thing, bring them in and position them to like lead a company. It all really does go back to networking. Something that I think that you've done well is kind of telling people like where you are in your journey so that so that your network can respond. I actually don't think I have done that well. In fact, you probably inspired me to actually update people on like what in the world is this girl up to these days.
It's been a struggle though.
I just move and do what I'm doing next. I never tell people. I never tell my network this is what I'm doing next, right? Because when people know where you are, they can help you too.
Yeah. But see, I've done that pretty well in the last like year or so.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with that though prior because I'm very private. I'm just a private person in general. I just like to move to the beat of my own drum. I'm introverted. Honestly, I can go sit in the corner with some music in my computer and be okay, honestly. But to your point, I have found that by speaking out, being a little bit vulnerable, which is also tough for me because again, I'm gonna blame it on being a Pisces. I've had I've had to have to work towards it, but yeah, definitely something. Hey, I closed the company down. The company actually was technically shut down for a year before I made that
Oh,
announcement.
you
By the way,
announced it. Yeah.
so a lot of people, and the response was actually crazy. My
Yeah.
network came in. I mean, that's part of networking though, because I had people who were DMing me and saying, "Do you need a job? Are you good? How can I help? What are you doing next? Are you looking for an investment?" And that made me really be like, "Dang!" Like I didn't utilize my network when things were going bad with CapWay because I was so. Part of it was embarrassment. It was like, "Dang, the company didn't make it." Like how? Like I'm looking at myself. It's like, "Oh, dang! Like we failed or I failed." And
Mhm.
now, then a year later, making the announcement, being like, you probably could have utilized your network and it probably would have been much easier than what you went through for this past year.
Absolutely. You know what I said on the last episode? Suffering in silence is never the way to go. We're recovering from those
I
from that
definitely,
mentality.
I definitely suffered. So as we're wrapping, you and I both have been, this journey. You now knowing everything that you know, having built your network, had the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. For someone who is listening, someone who is watching, and they're like, I don't have a network, but I'm trying to get there. What is your advice? What are you telling them to say outside of saying just step outside the house? What's your advice?
Yeah, you have to show up and you have to bring something to the table. As the way you communicate, it's like the art of presence and positioning. It's your body language. It's your energy. It's your communication style. It's actually being able to hold a conversation. These are the things that are most important when it comes to networking. And if you're confused, like, oh, where do I start? Just start with a question, right? You can walk up to someone and say, "Oh, not what do you do?" Because that's like the default one. But what brings you here, right? And then when a person says, "Oh, this is what brings me here," etc. Oh, that's interesting. How did you get into that line of work? Like, what is your background? Like asking people genuine questions that make them open up and respond to you versus you immediately trying to talk about yourself will help you with networking. And so I would recommend that to anyone who's trying to increase their network, trying to build a network. And I will tell you, my network is not complete. I am constantly trying to build upon the network that I have and the relationships that I have with more genuine and sincere people. And so you have to keep at it. And I think it's a lifelong journey.
Oh, for sure. Agree. I love that. Love that. All right. Well, what episode is this? Was this is the thing about this is we've been so into like creating and we actually talk about this on episode 7. Wait, is
Episode
it
7. Shout out to Anthony.
episode number 7?
Oh, Anthony, who is helping with all things podcast and producing this, hopped on and said this is episode 7. So shout out to Anthony.
And lucky number 7. 7 is my lucky number. I feel like 7 is everybody's lucky number. So maybe I
Not
should.
mine.
What's your lucky number?
I bounce between 13 and 16.
We're going to talk after this podcast. This episode 7, though, if you haven't checked out our previous episodes, please do. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, but reach out, network, network, network. It does make a difference. Who you know is just as important as what you know. I'm pretty sure we've all heard that saying. Sometimes it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And that is part of networking. So, episode 7, lucky number 7. I hope you take some luck and some tips from this. Go out, get you a deal, close you a deal, expand your network. And until next time, he said,
Yep.
what? Deuces.